So I wanted to talk to you today about the tarot card Death, and this is Death from the Rider-Waite pack. I can remember when I was fairly new to professional readings, I quickly picked out that if I'd done a spread for someone and Death or the Devil or the Tower, which with this deck are the cards that look, well, the Five of Pentacles and Nine of Swords, they look the darkest cards. That if I had a spread with any of those cards in the spread, my client was looking at those cards, not listening to me. So I very quickly started going straight to the cards that look most difficult to shine a light on those so I could keep the attention of my client. And I can remember reading quite early on where I went straight to Death, and excuse the traffic in the background, it's a Sunday, and I said, oh, you know, it's okay, death doesn't always mean death. And it was quite a flippant comment that I don't use anymore, because it became very clear very quickly that in this case death did mean death. And I don't think we talk about this in tarot enough. The only thing you can guarantee about each one of us is that at some point we will die. It is the only absolute in life. And yet so many tarot books and tarot posts just don't talk about that. If you are going to read the tarot for different people, at some point you will read for someone for whom death is at the forefront of their mind. You will read for somebody who is either facing the death of someone important to them, is processing the death of someone important to them, or who is facing their own death, because it's an absolute and it's a certainty. So don't just overlook this card. Having said that, of course, it does mean a lot more than death. But let's have a look at some of the imagery. One of the images I love is the skeleton. The skeleton, like death itself, is something that unites all of us. When we see a human skeleton, unless you really know what you're doing, you can't tell anything about that person. Some sense of age depending upon size of skeleton, but unless you know specifics, you're not going to be able to tell whether it's a male or a female skeleton, or whether that person was rich or poor, or had a good life or a happy life. Of course, if you take the time to really look, you'll be able to tell gender, but not at first sight. So this is a card that can hit any one of us at any time. And now if we have a look at the different people in the foreground, we really begin to learn something fascinating. We have the king or the emperor down here. The king or the emperor tries to be in control. The king or the emperor tries to plan his life out carefully, and he likes to know where he's going and how he's going to get there. Control. Now, death for me is a card of endings and beginnings. And it's very hard when we are used to getting what we want, because we are self-disciplined and hard-working, to find something in life that we have no control over. And so that to me is why the emperor or king is just flat out. Then we have the strength girl here, and if you look at her carefully, she is, or she appears to be, the girl from the strength card. She's trying to face death. She is trying to face this change, this unexpected change that she cannot control. Now, it's not like the Tower, it's not a sudden control. But I tend to find with death, it's a change that you know in your bones was coming, but you'd rather didn't. It's that sort of change. So she's trying to be strong, but she's swooning, because she can't quite face this completely. The two people that can face death is the young child and this figure here that I can only connect to being the Hierophant. So the young children, they just feel safe, they feel secure, they play and they feel totally loved, and hopefully, and they're able to accept change, because they understand that the universe is a place bigger than them, and they try to adapt to that change as it goes. And I think that's something that psychologically we can all try to create. And I think that is why the Hierophant is able to greet death with open arms. Because to me, the Hierophant is a spiritual teacher. Let's take the Christianity out of the card and say a spiritual teacher. And someone that understands that there are universal rules that dictate part of our life path. And sometimes things happen and we have no control over them, like autumn. It's a season, it comes round. And that probably is the best way, I think, for me to think of the death card in life. If you think of the seasons, every autumn, all of the leaves drop, certainly here in Britain, drop from the trees. And we can't control it. We have to adjust to it. We have to accept it's going to get colder. It's going to get darker. I will adjust my life to deal with that. And if I'm still trying to swim in the beach at Eastbourne, at 5 o'clock on a November evening, I'm going to get pretty miserable. And that to me is the death card. It's about a change that you cannot control. And the best thing you can do is, like the Hierophant or the child, accept this change. Accept that it's wheels that are bigger than you, and that you will just try to adjust and adapt. If I had death as the outcome card in a reading for myself or a client, I would keep the spread out. I would reshuffle the remaining deck, and I would ask for a clarity card, because for me, particularly death and the Wheel of Fortune, they are endings. There are blessings included in the Tower card, but not in the Death card, although we do have this rising sun. But for the Wheel of Fortune or Death, if I had those as outcome cards, I would leave the spread out, reshuffle, and add another card, because there is no presumption in death whether this outcome will lead to something better or something worse. But what I can tell you with the death card, if that's come up for you in a spread, whether it's psychological, whether it's for a small thing or a really big thing, the harder you try to hang on, the harder it will be.